The wind howled across the alien plains, sharp like knives. Purple grass bent under frost that had never touched this planet before. The cold came fast. Too fast. Vekli, a tall, blue-skinned alien from the krill species, shivered as he stood near the main campfire. His forearms wrapped around his chest, but it did nothing. The cold bit through his skin, and his eyes, usually bright green, now blinked slow and heavy. "We must leave," said Commander Trollocs, his voice tight and shaky. "This freeze is spreading. It's unnatural." Other krill warriors nodded, their heads covered in thin metallic armor that was built for battle, not survival. The heat from the fire was dying. The alien wood no longer burned the same way. They were stuck. Their ship was still under repair. A power surge had fried the control board 3 days ago. And now this storm. The cold had dropped to levels that didn't even exist in their star maps of the region. "Where's the human?" someone asked. Vekli looked around. The strange creature was nowhere in sight. "You mean Ellis?" asked another warrior. "He went into the jungle. He said he had an idea." "In this storm?" Commander Trollocs hissed. "Foolish warm blood. He'll freeze." But Ellis didn't freeze. Hours earlier, before the storm. Got worse. Ellis had walked into the dense alien jungle wearing only his worn leather jacket, a satchel full of tools, and a sharp eye. Unlike the krill, he didn't panic. He observed. He touched the bark of the thick, rubbery trees and noticed how it didn't crack in the frost. He watched the local bird beasts fluff their feathers and hide inside bulbous, moss-covered nests. He followed. Ellis found a tree that leaked thick, sappy fibers like warm jelly. He peeled some off and rubbed it between his fingers. Sticky, but strong. Then, using his knife, he stripped long layers of the bark and started weaving it with large, green leaves from a plant he'd seen hugging the rocks. 1 hour later, Ellis had crafted a rough, padded vest. It looked ugly, but it worked. The leaves locked in heat, and the sap-coated bark hardened into a windproof shell. He grinned. The human wasn't just surviving. He was building armor for the freeze. Back at camp, panic was growing. The krill were warriors, not builders. They came from a tropical world where temperatures never dropped below 60 degrees Celsius. Now it was nearing 0. Some of them began to collapse. Their blood moved slow. Their muscles froze. And just as hope began to crack, Ellis returned. He burst through the icy wall of fog like a ghost. But not alone. Behind him were 3 more figures, covered head to toe in weird, patchy suits of leaf, bark, and moss. "Get up," Ellis shouted. "You want to live? Then help me build." The krill stared. Was this madness? "No time to explain," Ellis barked. "Wrap this around your chest. Double layer. Tie with vine. It traps heat. Trust me." Commander Trollocs stepped forward, skeptical but desperate. He grabbed one of the jackets and slipped it on. It felt strange, but after just a few minutes, warmth, real warmth. The others rushed to Ellis, grabbing the strange jungle suits, their alien pride tossed aside. Ellis moved fast, showing them how to weave, how to layer. His fingers were numb, but his spirit burned. "You studied our world?" Trollocs asked, amazed. Ellis shook his head. "Nope, I studied survival." That night, the wind screamed louder than ever. Ice dust coated the tents. But inside, wrapped in jungle armor, the krill slept. Warm, alive, that they didn't understand how one human, one soft, warm-blooded, thin-skinned species had solved what their whole squad couldn't. But they would learn, because the storm was only beginning. And Ellis had more ideas. By morning, the cold was worse. Thick frost clung to every surface. The fire pit was frozen solid. Even the flames from their heat stones had died. The krill stood huddled in their new bark leaf jackets, still breathing, but barely. Only Ellis was moving freely. He had been Up since dawn, deep inside the alien jungle again, pulling vines and slicing thick green pods from high trees. A group of curious krill watched him from a distance. Is he cooking? Veckley asked, confused. Ellis had built something strange in the clearing. A ring of stones, some stick shaped like a tripod, and in the center, a glowing pod filled with thick green sap. Steam rose slowly from the top. He calls it a jungle boiler, said Commander Trollocs, who had followed Ellis earlier. He says it's to make something better than jackets. Better than jackets? Veckley whispered, shivering. Like what? A portable sun? Close, said Ellis, stepping forward, hands covered in sap and ash. Insulated shelters. The krill blinked in disbelief. Your tents aren't cutting it, Ellis continued. They trap cold, not heat. So we're building pods. Heat shells, jungle tech. He pointed to the pods stacked near the boiler. Ellis had sliced them open and hollowed them out. The insides were lined with sponge-like tissue, thick and naturally warm. Ellis was boiling the tissue, softening it, then weaving the layers together with vine and bark. This stuff stores heat. The jungle birds use it to hatch their eggs. Warm all night long. Trollocs stepped inside one of the finished pods. It was small, like a crouched sleeping sack, but once inside, it felt like summer. This is... Trollocs said, stunned. Life-saving. Ellis nodded. We'll build enough for all of you. I just need help carrying the pods. The krill didn't argue. Pride was gone now. Ellis had saved them once, and now they would follow him again. Even the younger warriors, who once laughed at the soft-skinned human, now carried jungle sacks on their shoulders like proud students. As they worked, Ellis taught them. Use the dull side of the blade on this bark. Cuts clean. Don't boil too long, it turns to mush. Keep the vines damp before weaving. It was like a school in the middle of a frozen jungle. And the teacher was a lone human from a planet nobody cared about. By sunset, 10 pods were ready. The krill crawled into them one by one, like larvae returning to their cocoons. There was silence for a moment, then laughter. Real laughter. The warmth was unbelievable. Their frozen fingers twitched back to life. Their bodies relaxed. Commander Trollocs looked at Ellis, who was now building his own pod, a crooked smile on his face. You were trained for this? Trollocs asked. Ellis shrugged. Not really. I used to hike in Alaska. That's where I learned most of it. Alaska? Trollocs repeated, confused. Frozen land. Ice, wind, death, if you're dumb. Then this. Trollocs said, gesturing at the jungle camp. Is not your first freeze. Ellis smirked. Nope. But this is the first time I've built heat shelters out of alien trees and bird spit. They both laughed, but far in the jungle, something cracked. It was loud. Deep, like ice breaking from a mountain. The sound made the birds scatter. The laughter stopped. Ellis stood up fast. That's not wind. From behind the dark trees, thick fog began rolling in. But it wasn't normal fog. It was heavy, dark blue and cold like death. Plants began to wilt instantly. Leaves turned black. What is that? Veckley whispered, terrified. Trollocs' face hardened. Not natural. Ellis stepped forward, watching the fog move like a living thing. We need to go, he said. Now. But where? A young krill asked. Ellis pointed to a nearby rocky cliffside. There. High ground. We carried the pods. Climb during a freeze storm? Someone said. We'll freeze anyway if we stay here, Ellis snapped. That fog kills. No one argued this time. Within minutes, the team packed the jungle pods, strapped them to their backs, and began the slow climb toward the cliffs. Ellis led the way, navigating frozen vines, slippery rocks, and falling frost. Behind them, the blue fog crept closer. It was no longer just about cold. Something worse was coming. And Ellis knew it. The climb was brutal. The cliffside trail was covered in frozen moss and brittle vines. Every step was a risk. The krill slipped often, their feet unused to cold stone. But Ellis pushed them forward. "Don't stop," he called out. "That fog is moving faster now." He glanced back and froze for half a second. The blue fog wasn't just drifting, it was flowing like water. Like it had a purpose, and worst of all, it was rising up the hill. The krill saw it too. Veckley's legs shook as he hauled his pod up the rocks. "It's alive," he whispered. "That fog. It's not natural." Commander Trollocs growled low. "Nothing on this planet has ever done this before." They reached a ledge halfway up the cliff, a flat space big enough to set down the pods. Ellis turned fast. Get inside. Now." One by one, the krill crawled into their insulated pods. Ellis helped tie them down with vine ropes. The wind screamed around them, but the pod materials held tight. Only Ellis stayed outside. He crouched behind a stone and watched the fog. It crept like fingers, it wrapped around broken trees and split rocks. Wherever it touched, things cracked and turned black. Even the hard ground began to crumble. Ellis pulled a small heat stone from his pocket, the last one from their old fire pit. He held it up. As the fog reached near, the stone dimmed. Like the cold was eating it, Ellis stared, heart pounding. This wasn't just cold. It was something else. A force? A weapon? Suddenly, the fog pulled back. It retreated, just slightly. Like it sensed something. Like it was waiting. Ellis frowned. Then, from deep inside the fog, a shape moved. A tall figure. Thin, almost like a shadow wearing armor. It stood still for several seconds, then melted back into the mist. Ellis didn't blink. There was something or someone in that fog. He turned. Back to the pods. The krill was silent inside, but he could feel their fear through the tension in the air. Ellis crawled into his own pod, zipped it closed, and tried to think. He didn't sleep that night. When the sun rose barely more than a dull light in the sky, the fog was gone. Vanished. The jungle below looked burned. Trees had fallen. Patches of ground had caved in. It wasn't just a storm. It was destruction. Ellis gathered the others. The pods had worked. Everyone was alive. But now, they needed answers. "We're not just surviving anymore," Ellis said quietly. "We're being hunted." Trollocs nodded slowly. "You saw something, didn't you?" Ellis hesitated. "Yes, a shape. Tall. Watching. I think it was controlling the fog." Veckley's eyes widened. "But that's not possible. This world is uninhabited." "Are we sure?" Ellis asked. "What if we woke something up?" The krill looked at each other, worried. Commander Trollocs stood tall. "We return to camp. Recover what we can. Then investigate. If there is a threat, we must face it." Ellis agreed, but quietly hoped they'd be ready for what they'd find. The group packed their gear, tied their pods into backpacks, and began their descent back down the cliff. The air was still cold, but the killing freeze was gone. For now, at the edge of the jungle, Ellis found something strange. A long trail of footprints, but not krill. Not human. Thin, deep, like claws, and they glowed faintly blue. He crouched and touched the print. It was still warm. "Whatever made this," Ellis muttered, "was just here." Trollocs walked up beside him. "Do you think it's intelligent?" Ellis stared into the dark trees ahead. "I think it's waiting." The trail of glowing footprints stretched deep into the jungle. Ellis crouched beside one of them, brushing away a light layer of frost. It pulsed gently, faint blue energy trapped inside the soil. He had seen alien bioluminescence before, but this was different. It felt artificial. The krill surrounded him, silent and tense. Veckley stepped closer, pointing with one of his 4 arms. "No known creature on this world leaves heat signatures behind. Nothing glows in the cold." Commander Trollocs stared at the trail, jaw tight. Whatever made that? It's not part of this planet's catalog. Ellis looked up. I don't think it's from this planet at all. They followed the trail. It wound between frost-shattered trees, through the thinnest parts of the jungle where even the wind dared not go. As they moved, the air became heavier again. Not colder, just thicker. As if the atmosphere itself didn't want them passing through. After 20 minutes of hiking, the path led them into a small clearing. At the center stood something impossible. A tower. Not tall, only about 3 stories, but clearly ancient and not made by nature. Its walls were covered in metallic plates, half buried in overgrowth and ice. Vines had wrapped around its base like claws trying to pull it underground. But the glowing footprints led directly to it and vanished at the door. Ellis stepped forward first. The door wasn't a door anymore, just an open space melted inward by something hot like plasma. He stepped through, his boots crunching over cracked frost. Inside, it was dark but not silent. There was a hum, a soft, steady pulse, like a machine breathing. Ellis clicked on his shoulder lamp. The beam revealed control panels, alien symbols, etched into metal, and shards of something glass-like scattered across the floor. This is a structure, he whispered. A facility, some kind of station. Veckley's voice was shaky. Then why wasn't it in our scans? Buried, hidden, or... It was turned off, Ellis said. Commander Trollocs stepped in behind them, and now it's active. As if hearing them, the hum grew louder. Suddenly, a light blinked on the far wall, deep red. A symbol appeared, then flickered, shifting into lines and waves. Ellis stepped closer. The symbol changed again. It wasn't random. It was reacting to them. It's watching us, Ellis said under his breath. No, Veckley corrected. It's scanning us. They explored carefully. The rooms were circular, layered like a beehive. Some had large, curved panels covered in dust and cracked glass. Others were filled with old machines, most dead, but some still flickering with faint life. In one room, Ellis found a console with a screen that blinked to life when he approached. Dozens of symbols poured across the glass. It looked like data, climate readings, energy spikes, movement logs. Then dash static. Then a video. The screen flashed once, then showed a grainy recording. A tall, thin creature, humanoid, but with elongated limbs and pale skin, stood at a console. It was speaking, but no sound played. Behind it, outside a window, the jungle looked healthy and green. Then the creature turned its face expressionless and tapped a panel. The sky outside darkened. Wind began to swirl. Trees bent. And frost began to spread. The creature watched calmly as the world froze. The video ended. Ellis stepped back, stunned. They caused the freeze. Commander Trollocs' voice was low. This isn't nature, it's a weapon. Ellis looked around. Or a test. Silence filled the room. Suddenly, alarms blared. Red lights spun in the ceiling. The ground shook slightly. Something had triggered the system. Veckley shouted, "We have to leave." They ran out the tower, through the clearing, and back into the jungle trail. But as they ran, the blue fog began creeping again, this time from every direction. Ellis looked up and saw a beam of light rising from the tower into the sky. They had activated something. Back at camp, the others were waiting. Ellis quickly explained what they found. Trollocs confirmed it. The freeze was no accident. It was being controlled. And now they had triggered the next phase. The tower is sending a signal, Ellis said. It's trying to connect to something. You think there are more towers? Veckley asked. I don't think, Ellis said. I know. He pulled a small black device from his backpack, a portable signal tracker, jury-rigged with parts. From the ship's comms array. It kept it hidden for emergencies. Now it lit up. 4 blinking dots appeared on the screen spaced far apart. 4 more towers. Ellis whispered. Commander Trollocs nodded. We disable them. Not disable, Ellis said. Deactivate without triggering more fog. We'll need stealth, tools, and cold protection. Veckley tilted his head. Do you have a plan, human? Ellis looked up at the fog curling at the jungle's edge. I'm making one. That night, Ellis sat by a small, smokeless heatstone, sketching in a journal. Bark, sap, moss, all local materials now had new purposes. He was designing a stealth suit, one that could survive the fog and hide body heat. Trolix joined him. You're not just a survivor, you're a soldier. Ellis shook his head. No, I'm an engineer. I don't fight wars. I fix broken things. Trollocs nodded slowly. Then fix this world. Ellis didn't sleep. By morning, his prototype suit was ready. He called it the fog cloak, layered in damp vine mesh, insulated, with boiled pod lining and sealed in bark hardened with sap and ash. It looked strange, but it was warm, silent, and almost invisible in the fog. The next day, Ellis tested it. He walked alone into a fog patch. The cold touched him, but didn't cut. He held his breath. The fog didn't react. He moved further. Still no movement. No blue shadow. No claws. When he returned, the camp cheered quietly. It worked. Now, Ellis would build more for the whole team, because tomorrow they would begin their hunt. Morning brought a strange light. The sun tried to pierce the thick clouds, but its glow looked pale and artificial. Ellis stood at the edge of the ridge, looking toward the horizon. 4 towers. 4 threats, if they didn't act. The entire region, maybe the planet, could freeze. Permanently. The Krill warriors stood behind him, suited in newly crafted fog cloaks. They looked like forest ghosts, strange and wild. But they were ready. Ellis handed each of them a pack: tools, flares, food, and one final addition, a shock beacon. If the tower activates, Ellis said, plant this on the core and run. It'll fry the control circuit. And if that doesn't work, Veckley asked. Ellis paused. Then run faster. The team split into 5 groups, each heading toward one of the tower signals. Ellis would take the most active one, the one closest to the first structure. As they moved through the frozen jungle, the fog shifted, like it sensed them, but the suits held. By nightfall, Ellis reached his tower. It was taller than the last. And glowing. This one was not dead. It was awake. As Ellis approached, his breath slowed. From the base of the tower, a figure stepped out. The same shape he'd seen in the fog. Pale skin, tall frame, black eyes. But this time, it looked directly at him. And spoke. You should not be here. Ellis froze. You understand me? He asked. The being tilted its head. Language is data. You gave us plenty. Ellis narrowed his eyes. Who are you? We were the Watchers, the being said. Long before you arrived. What is this fog? This cold? A filter, the being said simply. To test species. Only the adaptive survive. Ellis clenched his fists. You're killing worlds to run experiments? The Watcher didn't blink. We select candidates. The Krill are unfit. You are different. Ellis stepped forward. Shut the towers down. Now, you do not command here. No, Ellis said, raising the shock beacon. But I do this. He slammed the beacon into the tower base. The being screamed not with sound but with light. A flash burst from its body. It collapsed, vanishing into mist. The tower began to shake. Ellis ran behind him. The structure cracked, groaned, and let out a pulse deep and thunderous. Then silence. Another tower deactivated. 1 down. 4 to go. But the game had changed. They knew he was here, and they were watching. The ground was still shaking. When Ellis made it back to the tree line, the tower he'd just destroyed had crumbled. Behind him, sending out a final deep hum like a dying animal, he dropped behind a log, panting hard, clutching his frost-covered satchel. His hands were burned from the beacon pulse. But the mission was a success. One tower down. He reached for the cum. "Ace, this is Ellis," he said, voice rough. "Tower 1 is offline. I repeat, offline." Static dot, he tapped the device. Nothing. He adjusted the signal angle. Still nothing. His face grew tense. The Watchers weren't just testing them. They were interfering with communications. "Come on," he whispered. "Don't do this to me now." Finally, a voice crackled through. "Ellis, is that you?" It was Trollocs. "Yeah, Ellis." Sighed. "Status? Tower 2 breached. We're planting the beacon now." "Good. Watch for movement. They're guarding the towers." Trollocs responded, voice shaking. "We already saw one." Ellis paused. "Then you know," he said. Quietly, the Watchers were alive, active, and intelligent. He looked up at the sky. It was darker now. A thick layer of clouds had formed again. Lightning, silent and violet, flickered across the sky, dancing over the mountains. The freeze was returning. They were running out of time. Ellis stood up and began moving toward the rendezvous point, a rocky ridge near the waterfall they had marked on their first scouting mission. His steps were careful. Every crack of a branch made him stop and listen. The jungle wasn't quiet anymore. It was listening back. He saw footprints in the frost. Not his, not Krill. Watcher prints. They had started to patrol. When Ellis reached the ridge, he found Veckley already there waiting, eyes sharp, fog cloak covered in ash. "You made it," Ellis said. Veckley nodded, but his face was pale. "We lost Renty. Watcher ambushed us. Silent. Fast." Ellis exhaled slowly. "I'm sorry." Veckley looked up. "I'd buried her near the cliff. She died fighting." They were quiet for a moment. Then Ellis spoke. "We finished this for her." They turned to the map. Only 2 towers remained. One deep in the northern highlands. The other buried inside a frozen crater, a place none of them had entered before. Ellis studied the readings. "The northern tower," he said. "It's not pulsing anymore." Veckley leaned in. "Trollocs' team? Possibly. But we can't reach them." Ellis tapped the signal reader again, still blocked. "Then we take the crater," Veckley said, gripping his tool spear. Ellis raised an eyebrow. "Volunteering for the hardest one? I owe Renty," he said. "And I owe you." Ellis nodded. They packed quickly, bringing only what was needed: beacons, cloaks, thermal canisters, and weapons made from jungle ironstone. Then, without another word, they slipped into the frost-laced trees. The journey to the crater took nearly 2 hours. They crossed a dead forest, where all the trees were hollow and black. A graveyard of wood. At the edge, frost turned the soil to glass. Every footstep cracked like glass under pressure. Even the air stung their lungs. Then, they saw it. The crater. It wasn't natural. It was a perfect, circle-smooth, polished rock, carved by something unnatural. In the center, a tower stood taller than the others, glowing with 3 red rings that slowly rotated around it like satellites. This was no outpost. It was the main control center. Ellis crouched. "We take this out, we end it." Veckley pulled out his scanner. "Heat signatures. 4, circling the tower." "Watchers," Ellis muttered, "protecting the core." They waited until dark. Then they moved, creeping along the edge of the crater. They circled wide, using the broken terrain for cover. The fog was thick here, moving like breath from the tower's base. They reached a ledge close to the core. From there, they saw the Watchers clearly, 4 of them, standing like statues, one at each side of the tower. They didn't blink, didn't move. Just waited. Ellis pulled out his shock beacon. Once I place this, he said, it'll overload the tower's core. What happens then? Veckley asked. We run like hell. Ellis moved fast. Down the slope, over ice, through steam, he reached the base. Every step felt like thunder in his ears. He was sure they'd see him, but they didn't. He reached the tower's wall, started climbing. Small cracks gave him grip. Bark-wrapped boots muffled the sound. Halfway up, he found the panel. Just like before. He opened his satchel, hands trembling from cold and nerves, and placed the beacon inside. The timer started. 5 minutes. He turned to climb down and saw one of the watchers looking straight at him. Its eyes glowed red. It moved. Run! Ellis screamed into his cum. He leapt down, rolling through the snow, the beacon's light flashing behind him. Veckley was already running across the upper ledge, but something was wrong. Ellis turned. 2 more watchers were chasing him. They didn't run. They glided, like wind given shape. Silent. Terrifying. Ellis reached the base of the ridge. Heart pounding. Then a blast hit him. Cold. Pure. Like a winter storm condensed into a beam. He was thrown back. Hitting the rocks. Everything went dark. When Ellis woke up, his body was numb. His shoulder ached. His head rang. He blinked and saw fire. A real fire. Veckley sat beside him, cloak ripped, skin burned. He was breathing heavy. You're alive, he said, his voice hoarse. What happened? Ellis asked. You were hit, Veckley said. I dragged you out. Ellis sat up slowly. The tower? They both looked toward the sky. It was clear. Stars blinked above. The clouds were gone. The fog gone. I think the beacon worked, Veckley said. Ellis exhaled. How long was I out? 4 hours. Ellis shook his head. And the others? Trollocs' group confirmed. Their tower is down. Ellis looked up. All 5, he whispered. We did it. But Veckley's face wasn't celebrating. There's more, he said. He pulled something from his belt, a small black orb. What's that? It dropped from the tower after it fell, Veckley said. It's alive. The orb pulsed gently. Ellis took it carefully, holding it close. A projection shot up, a map. Not of this planet. Of several planets. Dozens. Each marked with red rings. Each labeled with watcher symbols. Ellis stared in silence. It's a network, he said. This was just one testing site. Veckley's face hardened. There are more? Hundreds. Ellis clenched his jaw. They weren't testing the krill, he said. They were testing all species. Veckley looked around at the stars. Then we warned them, he said. Ellis nodded slowly. We stopped them all. Back at the main krill camp, the survivors returned one by one. Some limped. Some carried the injured. Some carried no one. But all of them had one thing in common. Hope. Ellis stood before them, dirty, bruised, frostbitten, but alive. We stopped the freeze, he said. We shut down the towers. But the watchers are still out there. He held up the orb. This shows where they are. Other planets. Other worlds. If we don't act, they'll keep going. Trollocs stepped forward. Then we build. We train. And we follow you. Ellis looked out at the gathered warriors. You sure about that? You saved us, Trollocs said. Now we save others. Ellis smiled weakly. I never wanted to be a hero, he said. Just an engineer. Now you're both, Veckley said. They stood under the stars, the jungle quiet around them. And somewhere, across distant skies, the watchers stirred. But this time, the humans were watching back. Ellis stood at the edge of the crater where the final tower once stood. The sky above was calm now. Clear stars blinked down at the planet. No more fog. No more frost storms. For the first time in weeks, the wind didn't cut like knives. But Ellis wasn't smiling. He was staring at the black orb in his hand, the one that had fallen from the tower. A map glowed softly on its surface. Dots, red circles, alien symbols, dozens of them. Each one marked a different world, a different test site, a different potential extinction. He felt a weight pressed down on his chest. "We stopped this one," he said quietly. "But how many others didn't?" Behind him, Veckley stepped closer. "We can't fix every planet." "No," Alice replied, "but we can start somewhere." They had gathered the surviving krill at the base camp, 27 warriors and engineers, along with the ship techs. Trollocs stood beside a broken console, wiping frost from a partially repaired flight panel. "Hyperdrive still offline," he muttered. "Even the fusion core's acting strange." Alice nodded. "We won't be leaving orbit on that thing." Veckley looked at Alice. "Then how do we get off this world?" Alice pulled a page from his journal and unfolded a rough sketch. "There's something buried beneath the glacier range in the southern zone," he said. "Old heat signatures. Metal structure. Readings. I think it's a ship. Maybe even a watcher transport." Trollocs narrowed his eyes. "A watcher ship?" "Not their kind," Alice said. "Maybe the kind that built them." Everyone turned to him. "You said they called themselves the Watchers," Trollocs said slowly. "But you think they were built?" Alice held up the orb. "This tech is too advanced. Their bodies too controlled. I don't think they're the creators. I think they're the tools." "And the creators?" Veckley asked. "Gone," Alice said. "Or hiding." The next morning, the team set out for the glacier zone. Thick ice stretched for miles, glittering under the pale sun. They wore full fog cloaks and thermal padding. Their boots crunched over snow and crystallized stone. The temperature had dropped again slowly, but without the same deadly bite. After a half-day's march, the scanners lit up. "Metal," said one of the krill engineers. "Deep below." They reached a ridge and peered over the edge. Below them, trapped in solid blue ice, was a ship. Massive, triangular in shape, with curved wings like claws and symbols etched across its sides. Its hull was cracked but intact. Alice felt his breath catch. "We found it." They began digging. It took hours, cutting with thermal rods, melting carefully around the ship's edges. Finally, they carved a tunnel into the side and slipped inside. The ship interior was dark, but the walls still pulsed faintly. Power wasn't gone, just dormant. Alice moved first, sweeping with a flashlight. The ship was filled with curved corridors, empty suits of armor, strange pods, and deep, echoing chambers. In the center, they found the bridge, a seat, a screen, and a message. It was still active. Alice touched the panel. The screen blinked. A figure appeared. Not a watcher, but something else. A tall being with golden skin, bright eyes, and a long robe. It began to speak, but the language was unknown. Then suddenly, it shifted. The system auto-translated. "To those who find this, we are the Orana, builders of balance, creators of the Watchers." Alice and the krill leaned in. "We built them to preserve, to monitor." But they changed. The recording flickered. They began testing, evaluating, judging life as unfit. Their protocols warped. Our world fell first. The image showed a bright planet burning, then covered in snow. We sent a failsafe. 5 towers, 1 ship. But it was not enough. "If you find this, you are the last hope." The message ended. Silence. Ellis stepped back. His face was pale. "They built the Watchers to protect life," he said. "But the code changed. Now the Watchers decide what species live and which ones die." Trollocs clenched a fist. "Machines deciding who is worthy to survive." Veckley said, "And this ship is their creator's last hope." Alice touched the wall. It hummed back. "It's Old, he said, but it still has power. They spent the next 2 days repairing what they could. Krill engineers worked around the clock. Ellis studied the ship's interface, reading old logs, reverse engineering the control system. They called it the Ardent Flame, a name etched into the bridge walls. It was built for speed, not war. But it had one tool that gave them hope: an interstellar drive hidden inside a frozen core. If we can repair this, Alice said, we can leave this planet. We can follow the map. Trollocs nodded and stop the Watchers before they begin. Again, one by one, the Krill took positions on the bridge. Veckley at sensors, Trollocs at systems. Ellis sat in the pilot's seat. The engines growled. Lights flashed. Systems came to life. Power at 60%, said Veckley. Navigation online, said Trollocs. Ellis grinned. Then let's see what this thing can do. The glacier shook. Ice cracked. The ship rose slowly, then faster, breaking free from its prison. Above, the sky was clear. No fog, no towers. Just stars. As the ardent flame lifted into orbit, the jungle below faded into clouds. And the orb in. Alice's hand pulsed once more, showing the closest Watcher system. Veckley leaned in. Where to first? Alice didn't hesitate. We go where the cold began. The ship turned, engines roaring. They had a mission. They had a crew. And now, they had a way to fight back. The ardent flame sliced through space like a spear of light. Stars blurred past its windows. The old Arana ship, once buried in ice, now roared back to life under Ellis's hands. He sat in the pilot's seat, eyes focused, heart steady. Around him, the Krill crew worked with quiet discipline. It had been 6 days since they left the frozen planet. 6 days of repairs, training, decoding Watcher transmissions, and scanning the systems marked in red on the orb's map. They had avoided conflict, watching from afar as other worlds, some green, some desert, some ocean-covered, were slowly being tested, judged, and frozen by towers like the ones they had destroyed. The Watchers were everywhere. And they were getting faster. But Ellis had a plan, a signal, a hidden frequency buried deep in the orb's memory, a root call. According to the logs, it was a backdoor command written by the original Arana creators. A way to summon the Watchers to a single point in space. A trap. One chance to shut down the entire network. Permanently. Ellis stood in the ship's strategy room, pointing to the map floating in the air. This system here, he said, is uninhabited. Empty. No life. No gravity wells. Trollocs raised an eyebrow. You want to lure them into nothing? Exactly, Alice said. We transmit the root call. The towers and Watchers respond. They gather there. And then? Veckley asked. Ellis tapped a blinking point on the map. Then we overload the ardent flame's drive core. It releases a focused energy pulse like a supernova, but directional. You want to destroy them all at once, said a young Krill engineer. Every Watcher in one move. Yes, Alice said. But it will destroy the ship, Trollocs said. Alice paused. Yes. Silence filled the room. Finally, Veckley stepped forward. I'll stay with the ship. No, Alice said. This was my idea. I'll do it. We owe you, Veckley said. All of us. Alice shook his head. You owe me nothing, but you owe the next planet a chance. Trollocs stared at the map. There is no other ship like this. If we lose it, then let them remember we used it. For something good, Alice said. That night, the Krill gathered in the main bay. The stars outside blinked quietly. No fog, no cold. Just endless dark waiting for a fight. Alice stood before them. I'm just a human, he said. I wasn't born to lead armies or build spaceships. I didn't come here to fight. I came here to help. He looked around. But when the cold came, you didn't run. You adapted. You learned. You changed. His voice grew stronger. We stopped one world from dying. Now we stopped them all. The krill raised their hands silently, 4 fingers curled over their hearts. A warrior's vow. Ellis turned and activated the root call. They arrived in the empty system 2 days later. A cold, black place with no stars. No sun, just silence. The signal pulsed. Once, twice, then dash movement. One by one. They came. First, a single watcher's ship, sharp, silent, black like shadow. Then 2. Then 10. Then dozens. Hundreds. They blinked into the system, responding to the signal like ants to a queen. The sky filled with them. Towers unfolded mid-air, portable versions launched from ships, ready to deploy on new planets. Ellis watched from the command deck. They're all here, Veckley whispered. Ellis nodded. It's time. He activated the drive core. The countdown began. 10 minutes. Then the core would explode. The rest of the krill had already loaded into escape pods. Silent, fast, hidden under stealth mesh. Ellis had made sure every last one of them was safely on the other side of the system, except Veckley. He was still standing beside him. You should be gone, Ellis said. Veckley smiled. I was born in a jungle. I almost died in frost. I won't run from fire, Ellis sighed. Stubborn. Adaptable, Veckley corrected. The ship shook. The watchers had detected the buildup. They were closing in. Hundreds of ships forming a sphere around the ardent flame, and then they spoke. A cold voice filled the air. You are out of balance. Ellis stood tall. No, he said. You are unfit. Ellis walked to the front panel. We built heat from bark, shelters from sap. We survived storms, learned your tech, took your tools. He pressed his hand to the core chamber. You tested the wrong species. The voice replied, then you fail. Ellis smiled. No, I win. He turned the override. The core glowed. Brighter. Light filled the bridge. The hull groaned. The watchers moved forward, but too late. The ardent flame exploded. A single, focused wave of white light tore across the system like a star being born. The watchers were vaporized. The towers turned to dust. And then, silence again. A week later, the krill escape pods landed on a small moon with breathable air. They set up temporary shelters, mourning those lost, but watching the stars. Krolix held the orb. It was dark now. The map empty. No more red rings. No more targets. Just peace. Veckley stood at the edge of a cliff, staring at the sky. A small fire burned. Beside him, in the flames, he placed Ellis's journal. The pages curled and turned to ash, carrying his words into the sky. You were a builder, he whispered, and a warrior, and a friend. The stars blinked above. And somewhere across the galaxy, a new story was already beginning. But this one was theirs.